Hello, Great Faith Groups, and welcome to the bonus teaching for the month of Foundations of Great Faith. Today we're looking at making time and having a plan for the foundations of great faith in our life. I'm not a naturally disciplined person. I'm not routine oriented. If I had my way, I would wake up. Whenever I woke up, I would have very few appointments on the calendar. I would just kind of see where the day takes me. And though I recognize there's a value for spontaneity, for spontaneous living in our lives, there is also a value and a time where a disciplined life is more beneficial. But that's a challenge for me. Although I like to make the joke that I am so good at routines, I make a new one every day. The reality is I'm not. But there are times, and I think that growing in things, getting stronger in things, including our faith, is the time where we need to make time for it and have a plan. I recently took up a new sporting endeavor, setting some goals as I continue to fight off aging and continue to love learning new things. And as part of that, I had to learn or get better at a particular sport. And so with this, I didn't really know where to start, but a friend of mine was a coach. And so I said, hey, will you help me do this? And he said, okay, when are we going to do it? That was the first question. The first thing we had to do for me to get better at this, to improve in this, was to put it in my schedule, was to make time for it. And then he said, okay, and when we get there, I'm going to come and I'm going to have drills and I'm going to have goals and I'm going to have a plan for how you can get better. And he started with assessing things and then building on certain things through specific drills. And there was always a plan. It wasn't just show up and just jump in. It was show up, follow the plan. And when it comes to great faith and the foundations, the spiritual disciplines of our faith, it's the same thing. We have to make time in our schedule and have a plan for that time. So let's look at making time. First of all, I want to clarify, this isn't finding time. You see, you'll never find more time. Your schedule's probably busy. You've probably maxed out the amount of time that we all have, 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, unless it's a leap year. Then we get a bonus day. We won't find more time. If you find more time, can you tell me what it is? Because I'd like to take up fishing. But what we can do is we can make time in the schedule that we have. You see, we all have the same number of squares on our weekly calendar. Which ones are you going to mark off and say, this is my time with God? Ephesians 5:16 says this, make the best use of our time because the days are evil. And what I believe the author is telling us as disciples is to make the best use of our time, which is spend time with God, because the days are filled with things that try and draw us away from God. So we need to make time to specifically connect to God. Some people call it quiet times. I just like to call it our time with God. And when we make that time, let me give you a few suggestions. It should be made at a time of day that will, in a positive way, impact the rest of our day. In other words, I would encourage you to consider making it towards the start of the day, to make that time the thing you start with so that the rest of the day you go through already connected to God. And here's the challenge I'm going to give you. Make at least 30 minutes every day for your time with God. Now, for some of you, you might already be well beyond that. That's great. Don't reduce it down to 30 minutes. But for those of you, if you are anywhere less than 30 minutes a day in your time with God, I want to challenge you to make 30 minutes in your schedule every day to spend with God. Jesus did this. The Bible tells of how Jesus would wake up early in the morning and go off on his own to be with God. So if it was Jesus' plan, if it was what helped him stay connected to God and what God was doing in his life, I think we should too. And the goal of this 30 minutes is just connection with God. You don't necessarily need to get a new revelation that's going to change all of Christianity. You just need to get connected with God, to be a good husband if you're married, a good father if you have kids, a good neighbor or a good colleague at work, or a good classmate if you're in school. To connect with God and to disconnect from other things. We live in a day and age where there are so many studies out there that are showing the things that fight for our times are more than ever before, that fight for our attention, that fight for our that are trying to distract us. And so it's a time where we look to connect with God and disconnect from the things that are distracting us from God. So how do we do that? Okay, we got our 30 minutes now in our calendar. Now what do we do? Well, let's make a plan, because failing to plan is planning to fail. But we want to make a plan that's going to help us connect to God. In fact, this month, what we're going to look at in each of the 4 weeks is we're going to look at the spiritual disciplines for our heart, for our mind, for our soul, and for our strength. And then as we do that, you're going to add each of those disciplines into that 30 minutes. And don't worry, 30 minutes is enough. If you need more, make more time. But I do believe you can do these spiritual disciplines in these 4 key areas for 30 minutes. You see, we plan to put in the work, and then we got to put the work into the plan. And what I mean by that is we're going to create a plan, and then we're actually going to follow that plan. And here's why. We want to stay connected to God so that we might have the life of great faith that God wants for us. John 15 starts with a passage where Jesus is talking about we are the branches, and to bear fruit, we must stay connected to the vine. And we know that God is the vine, Jesus is the vine, and we need to make time to be connected to the vine so that we might bear fruit of great faith in our life. You see, if you live disconnected, you will be depleted. In other words, if you live disconnected, you won't have the strength, the wisdom, the energy, the life of Christ in you that you need. You will be depleted and you will feel tired trying to live as a person, a believer of great faith. And if you live depleted, eventually you will be defeated. So if we're disconnected, eventually we will find ourselves defeated. So this month, we're going to look at a plan. We're going to put together a plan to connect the 4 parts of who we are in the Great Commission that we're to love God with. We're going to create a plan that will help us connect our heart, our soul, our mind, and our strength to God every day. But the challenge right now as you go away from this teaching is to take out your calendar and to find 30 minutes in every day. Let me repeat that actually, because not to do it. See, it's so easy for us to do it. To take out your calendar and to make 30 minutes every day in your schedule. Would you do that?